Hello and welcome to the podcast of the Prison Officers Association, the UK's largest professional union for prison, correctional and secure psychiatric workers with over 30,000 members. Weapon-related assaults on prison staff have increased from 10% of all assaults in 2010 to 25% in 2022. And knife and blade attacks have increased by 16% in the most recent year that statistics are available for. Despite awful assaults with life-changing consequences, the response of the employer and of government has been slow. The union is awaiting the outcome of pilot exercises on the removal of razors. This is expected imminently, but the union has persistently said that this overcomplicates and delays what should be a straightforward decision. The signatories to a Parliamentary Early Day Motion clearly agree. In this podcast, National Chair Mark Fairhurst and General Secretary Steve Gillan set out the union's campaign to banish blades from jails, why there is optimism about the progress towards this, and what members can do to most effectively keep themselves safe in the meantime. Mark, perhaps if we could start with you, why do you think the government is so slow to act on the problem of razors in prisons?
I don't think it is the government. I think it's the ineptness at a senior leadership level within HMPPS that struggles to make a decision on absolutely anything and simply has no excuses left because this union has been badgering them since a series of atrocious assaults on POA members way back in 2018 with razor blades. We've been badgering them to get rid of them with immediate effect. And all they keep hitting us with is, we're going to have a deep dive and look into the drivers and why this is happening. Then we'll start a pilot and then we'll analyse our findings and then we'll come up with a paper and then we'll have another pilot, and it rolls on and on and on. And what I can't get my head round is, if I was the leader of HMPPS and somebody was telling me I can reduce assaults on staff, assaults prisoner on prisoner, and reduce self-harm throughout the entire prison estate overnight, I'd be saying, how are you going to do that? And when it comes to like that, simply removing razors and replacing them with electric shavers can do that overnight, I'd be biting that person's hand off. So the question has to be asked, why haven't HMPPS leaders got their act together and removed razors? Why has it taken since 2018 for this again to hit the headlines, for our members to receive life-changing injuries and be disfigured for life, for them to get their act together?
I think that's a point extremely well made. Steve, as Mark just told us, there have been some pilot exercises that are just coming to an end now. Is there any grounds for optimism that those pilot exercises will finally lead to the change that the union has been seeking?
Well, we're certainly hoping so. We hope it just doesn't come down to cost. That's the real issue concern for myself and Mark. But if you actually look over the period, you know, everything on health and safety, this union has had to fight for, whether it's a cessation of smoking in the workplace, whether it's the rollout of PAVA, whether it's rigid handcuffs, everything that we wanted to try and affect the health and safety of our members and make it a better environment to work in, both for staff and prisoners, we've had to fight for. Nobody, the employer, government, haven't given us anything. We've had to make the case and make sure that our arguments are coherent and effective. And I think we've done that. I mean, myself and Mark, it seems these days we're never off the TV or the newspapers about the prison crisis. And we continue to make those arguments. I mean, that was a dreadful attack at Humber. We've seen dreadful attacks at Swansea and various other places. And you know what? If they can withdraw razors, and we're not saying just the withdrawal of razors is going to be the panacea of everything. We accept we work in an environment where there are always going to be issues. But what the employer has to do under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 is minimise that risk. So the reality is, by withdrawing razor blades, that will assist to minimise the risk, but we also want them to go further about withdrawing cans as well, so that they can place them in plastic and make the workplace safer for prisoners and indeed staff. So optimistic, I think we are optimistic because we've made the case, we've pushed and pushed and pushed on this issue. And I think we have won the argument, quite frankly. So I hope the sensible thing is done when they finally make their announcement.
MPs in Parliament, Mark, are ahead of the government on this, it seems, with an early day motion being put down, supported by politicians from just about every party that's represented in the House.
Yeah, that's right. And doesn't that just demonstrate the respect this union has amongst the political elite? Because, as you say, cross-party support for an early day motion asking the government to remove razors with immediate effect. It was actually part of their white paper to remove razors from prisons to reduce serious assaults. And I think Steve's hit the nail on the head. I think it comes down to cost, which is an absolute disgrace. What cost you put on your staff's safety? This is HMPPS employees, and they're worried about the cost. Well, I don't care how much it costs. I just want prisoners to stop self-harming, to stop attacking each other, and more importantly, to stop attacking my members on the front line, whose only crime is to do their job and protect society. So to hell with the cost. We had a pilot in Whitemore. They just decided locally to remove razors after a really serious assault. That was over 18 months ago, probably knocking on 2 years. And with the type of clientele they look after, there hasn't been any backlash. They just give them all electric shavers. And all we're asking for is, look, initially, supply every prisoner who requests one with an electric shaver. And once they vandalise them or break them, they're responsible to replace them. They can buy them from Argos. And as Steve said, we've been asking for tins to be replaced with plastic pouches because tin lids can be used as a sharp-edged implement as well. And we're getting nowhere with that. And that's even easier to replace than razors because you just tell DHL, the canteen supplier, from this date, you no longer supply tins.
And Steve, you mentioned health and safety legislation and the obligations on employers to provide a safe system of work. It's fair to say, isn't it, that POA branches at a local level can make a difference, can really move the dial on this by the way they use risk assessments in their health and safety work.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we remind our branch officials all the time of the need to ensure that risk assessments, safe systems of work are carried out, not just once, but every time there's an incident. Periodically, they've got to be carried out. And we've got the expertise in this union through our executive as well, who go round and assist on health and safety visits and different things like that. I'm glad you mentioned about the early day motion, because, yeah, that's the value of our parliamentary work with all different political parties through our political fund. And I know that we've done a podcast on that recently as to the value of the political fund. And this is just another example where our members can get on board as well, right to the MPs, get even more MPs into this, because let's face it, there's a general election coming. And of course, MPs of all parties will be tripping over each other, quite frankly. We know the MPs that support us and have done over a period of time, and it's the same ones all the time. And there's too many to single out, particularly in the Labour Party. And indeed, one or two in the Conservative Party, the SNP, and rightly, as you say, across the whole political spectrum. But this is a major opportunity, and this is another demonstration of how we put to good use the political fund money by influencing members of Parliament. It gives us an opportunity to spend that political fund on our members' health and safety and campaigns. And that's exactly what we're doing. So, yeah, it is pleasing in respect to that.
This podcast is being produced in conjunction with a feature article on the union's campaign to get rid of razors from prisons in the latest Gate Lodge magazine. But in wrapping up our discussion today, Mark, have you got a message that you'd like to give government, or more particularly the employer, on this issue?
Well, the employers assured us a decision will be made after analysing all their pilot schemes, whether to remove razors or not. And what I'm saying to them and to this government is, you need to remove the risk. And yes, there are other risks, and prisoners can make weapons out of absolutely anything. But this is a real, imminent and serious risk. It's been proven time and time again how serious the risk to everybody raises is. So what I'm saying is remove the risk to our employer, to the government. And what I'm saying more importantly to our members is, as I've always said, if you are being asked to perform a task or a duty that you think is unsafe, then don't do that until it's made safe by your employer. Make yourself familiar with the health and safety protocol, which is legally binding, and work as safe as you can in work. And realise how powerful you are if you stay united, stay strong, and insist on safe working conditions, because we on the NEC will always have your back. But let's remove the risk.
And Steve, any final thoughts from yourself?
Well, I think Mark's made it really, really clear there in that final message. And I'd say this, our health and safety is absolutely paramount. And of course, we would like to see the full reports as well and hold the employer to account on these pilots. I hope you'll be able to share. I know that myself and Mark have continually asked to see them, because let's face it, the reports are done. They're just lying there, gathering dust. And we certainly know that any responsible employer would take it absolutely seriously to minimise the risk, as is their duty under the Health and Safety at Work Act. And I can't see any reason why they wouldn't withdraw wet razors, quite frankly. 2024, at the end of the day, that's exactly what should be happening. So we look forward to them making the correct decision. And if not, we'll hold them accountable, and we may have to seek legal advice as to see what our next steps are.
My thanks to Mark and Steve. More information on the ongoing campaign is to be found in April's issue of Gate Lodge and on the union's website at poauk.org.uk, where you can also find more on risk assessments and safe systems of work and, of course, information on how to join if you are not already a member. Thank you for listening. We hope you have found what you heard to be of interest and will join us for the next episode of the POA podcast. Thank you and goodbye.